even the public did not deserve that. And this is an obvious assassination attempt. Look at where they are aiming. It is back left, where they knew that our leader would be sitting. And you can see, if they can't get the head, they are trying anywhere they can get. Yeah? This cowardly, illegitimate regime must be stopped.
There's no reason why police should use this kind of force against unarmed citizens who are merely exercising their democratic right. And it must also be added that you are not even in the CBD. You are on the outskirts of the central business district of Nairobi. And it continued raining for a very long time. Got then live bullets. My own car was hit 7 times with live bullets. And you could see the direction of the bullet were all aimed at me. Okay? So we want to say that, look, this is really terrible. These people have, because, been threatening us and they've been blackmailing. Unfortunately, the friends of this country are not helping.
This is our motherland. We do not have another country. Yes. And if the Constitution gives us the freedom to demonstrate peaceably, why would they want to kill us? There's no doubt in our mind that they have determined they want to kill some of us.
And as that was happening, of course, the president was meeting with the American Chamber of Commerce and members there, where we had very good also deals for the country as well. You can see this particular picture. This is the current state of play where everyone is facing the other side, and Kenya is banning the beetle. Are they not really, of course, aware of what is currently happening? Banning not in the sense truly as banning, but banning the economy, banning or flaring up that particular friction with that ethnic also brinkmanship that we are talking about. We just want to hear what the president also had to say during that particular meeting with the delegates from the US.
The statement I am making is that if it is okay for you to pay your tax in time, it must be okay for you to get your tax refund in time. And if we fail, for whatever reason, after you have paid your tax in time, I am saying, after 6 months, all verified tax refunds, you can net off from what you're supposed to pay to the government of Kenya. My administration is finalizing a new tax policy guideline that have gone through various stakeholder consultations, including inputs from AmCham. This policy that will enhance transparency in our tax regime will take effect by June 2023, that is this year, and it will be in place for a minimum of 3 years. Following consultations with stakeholders, VAT on exported services will now be removed in the finance bill in the coming budget in June this year.
Well, that was happening concurrently yesterday, and we just want to put into context. Let's just hear from, is it Professor Gitela Naitoli? Yeah, first of all, on this particular editorial cartoon, and the comments that we just saw there as well.
Yes, when I look at that cartoon, I have this feeling that the president is absconding one of his roles. You see, the president is wearing 2 hats. The president is the head of government, but he is also the head of state. So as head of government, he is excused to take a hand line. But as a head of state, he is the father of the republic. He is the father of the country. He is supposed to be softer than all of us. He is supposed to be above board. Okay? There is that, I think I gave you that analogy from the way we deal with the domestic problems in Meru, when the husband and the wife, you have issues, and the children get involved, and the children come to you and tell you their mother did this. All you do is yes, 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 and you never comment. They never know which position you are. That is how the end of state is supposed to behave in this situation. But also, it's my feeling that as now end of government, you should also be able to predict where this thing may very well go if it's allowed to continue. You see, the president did something beautiful for Kenya. He introduced class consciousness. Wonderful. Because if policies are made based on that, they can be very good. That's how America works. The Democrats are for the downtrodden, the Republicans are for business people. So introduce the solar concept, and for the first time since independence, you can argue very well we voted without the tribe. Okay? Now the risk he is taking is these Azolas could turn around and actually start a class war if they think is allowed to continue, if the positions are allowed to handle. So for me, it couldn't even be worse, because what happens when there is a conflict and it's not controlled is both the government and the opposition may lose control of now what comes next. Because you hear things like, if you look at social media, they tell Raila, if you go and shake again and abandon us, this time we will take matters in our own hand and abandon you. That's a warning to Raila. Okay? You can expect that the underliners in government probably are telling the president the same. The president needs to transcend that, because this thing can go into tribal conflict. It can also become a class conflict. So the president now, he needs to diminish one role, end of government, and then become more end of state, become more father of the nation. That way, when the judge talks, he will listen. When the international community raises the red flag, he is able to listen, and therefore call the other party so they can have both the dialogue and the conversation, like my friend here, Wakil, put it. There is no weakness in becoming a peacemaker. In fact, whoever transcends the chest thumping and ambush himself, these are the people who always remember and recognize. Martin Luther King, even Jesus Christ. He died on the cross, Caesar died in the palace, but nobody thinks about Caesar today. We all think about Jesus. So, we talk about Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King. These are people who humbled themselves. Even Mandela, 27 years in jail, he had no bitterness against his jailers. He sat down with them and they formed the Rainbow Nation in South Africa. So what we are saying here is the president, as end of state, we want him to become our Martin Luther King, we want him to become our Mandela, we want him to become our Mahatma Gandhi. In fact, we also want him to become our Jesus and free us from the sins we are now involved in. In my opinion, they need to address this problem and they need to do it now.
Mm-hmm. All right. Let's say from is Dr. Kalua? I've lost my track.
What I think we need to do.
It's you. It's him.
Okay, something he said which I needed to react to.
Yes.
We are a country of short memory. During 2007 clashes and Kofi Annan's intervention, there was a team that was meeting in Serena. That team, the hardliners in that team was Martha Karua on the other side and William Ruto on the other side. And what were the issues that were in Serena? Electoral justice. Kriegler report came out of that. And what was Kriegler's report? That unless we reform and unless we organize our elections, we are setting ourselves up. And what are we seeing now? We are seeing a very partisan approach to formulation of an IEBC. What does that portend? Legitimacy problems. So what we were solving at Serena, we want to undo, or we want even to go overboard again in this regime. Two, there was the issue of historical injustices. We even had TJRC created out of that. What did we do? We went, did a report. After the report, we shelved it. What are we seeing? What is Gashoga saying? We are the children of Mama, people took our land. What is that? It is supposed to have the issue of historical justice we should have dealt with. What are we doing? We are uncovering that can and the bees or whatever else that the professor doesn't like because they are sent by witch doctors. When they come out and they sting, there will be something that we'll have to contend with. So we have that issue of historical injustice. So what are we doing? We are invading the Kenyatas, and what are we saying? That these lands were taken from our people. We're having conversations in this country that will take us to a road that will start getting animations in Rift Valley, because remember, there are people settled in Rift Valley who came from Central. If you start telling them about people of Central that they want to come back for their lands, what are we telling people in the Central, in Rift Valley to do? To also agitate for their land. So we are creating a situation that will snowball out of our hands. In the meantime, forget about what's happening on the streets. Listen to what's happening in the counties. Counties are not being funded. Counties are borrowing, are taking overdrafts to pay salaries. Constitutional commissions are not paying salaries on time. Generally, even civil servants are not getting the payments they are supposed to be getting in time. In other words, we have a cash crunch. When this government came, they said they are not going to borrow. They are now borrowing overdrive, even worse than what Uhuru was doing. Why? Because we don't have money, and they have to borrow to sustain activities. So away from even demonstrations, I hear what you're saying about cost of living. The things we are doing right now and the cash crunch we're having right now requires that we sit down and say, wait a minute, we do have a challenge in our hands and we might not be able to sustain it. But what are we doing? What are we seeing? The government is running full throttle. You'll think that everything is okay. They are calling everybody else names. Yet this is the time for us to be sober and say, wait, we need each other. This country needs to move, and for it to move, we need to know that this is a challenge, let's work together to fix it. The opposite is what we are seeing. We are taking up state power. Now, of course, the central bank governor job is up. Who are we going to see in that job? Not merit. It's going to be one of our own, one of the shareholders. Now, if you are not a shareholder, it doesn't matter how competent you are. You might not get that job. What message are we sending? That the biggest chunk, the fatty meat, we are reserving it for ourselves, whether we are competent or not. That is not the message you want to get in the country. So I'm saying Raila is not the problem. We are our own problem. This government has to deal with itself. It has to decide whether it wants to run the country or it wants to drive it down. It has to decide that. Otherwise, they will be unable, even without, they will be unable to proceed if they are proceeding the way they are going. They will not get the taxes. Of course, the protestations don't help. The demonstrations don't help. They hit at confidence levels. Now, when the situation is bad, you don't need another shock into that situation. Of course, these shocks are going to be there. It will take us a while to recover. I don't see any other way other than all of us sitting together and saying, we will perish. Is like that man in the Bible who said, I sit here, I'll die. I go there, I'll die. Let me go. We must go.
Yes.
The lepers.
Wow.
See,
the
bus. God doesn't, he uses people to deliver his message. Please take this one as one that has just been delivered to the nation.
Yes.
I had a session just this last weekend with one old man. His name is Samson Nyange, or Samson Manzi Wanyange. He is 102 years old. I'll share the photo with you later, maybe on my Facebook. I asked him, what is the secret of getting to where you have gotten that you can say today? He is very energetic. He could actually run and farm and moving on. His wife is about 93 or thereabout. He told me there is only one word, and this is the secret to success in life. He told me, avoid a word in Kikamba. It's called Kivudia. Kivudia is Madharau. He says the moment you apply Kivudia, the moment you apply Madharau, the moment you lack respect for your other person and think that you are better off, you have totally lost everything else. And he says life starts from that. You look at any evil in the society, it starts by just disrespect, Madharau. If we can take this word and apply what our brother is talking about, these are the things that we need to do. There are only 5 things that we need to do under the current situation that makes sense, away from the talks that we are having. And he has alluded to the first one, changing ourselves. I can't say this enough times. We need to ask ourselves, what is this that I am doing that is going to change the nation, the me, the next person, as a family, as a company, any in the association. Number 2, and this we talked about it with the team of Charles Wambugu and the other team members, PLO, the other day. We need a conference, a national conference, that will bring and address not just this issue, but much more than this about what has been happening. What is this that causes us to disrespect each other in one way or another? And that must be represented by people, representation across the society in a way, and when people talk about it, things will start to change. Number 3, to be available, to be the elements, to be the team that is going to bring truce, because truce does not happen with the 2 people. It is amongst ourselves. The people who are talking, they are talking very bitterly. They won the elections. They are in power. Nobody should tuner us. Nobody should take us. The other ones are talking about there is high cost of living. Everybody wants to talk this discussion. The other ones are talking about, leave alone the issues of opening the server and all this. This can be addressed differently. But the real issue is about the issues that Kenyans are facing. The 4th issue, which is very important and we need to address, is, and by that I was talking about the spirit of reconciliation. The 4th one, even as the mess and the fight that is ongoing at the moment, we want to see the presidency, we want to see the Council of Governors, we want to see the arms of government sitting down together to address the cost of living. We see your cameras shooting at these guys saying, we are gathered here today to address the cost of living. We have done A, B, C. These are the immediate things that we are doing. We have done D, F, and continuing, and these are the ones that will happen in the near future. And then finally, we did an appeal, and I want to do it on set today. Can Raila Odinga and the team at the Azimio please consider calling off the fight and the street demonstrations? They are hurting the country, and the point, I believe, is home, just like my colleagues talked about earlier on. Let us engage. Let us start thinking about this. There are people who are losing lives. There are people who are being maimed. There are people who are dying out of different things. People cannot get their oxygen in the hospitals when there is these fights because people will not let their vehicles to get out there. The roads are being closed and all this. So I want to appeal very kindly that they consider calling off. Can you imagine? Just the imagination that on Monday it will be a mother of all demonstrations. You know, it will take a very small thing. We may rely on the police, But wait until the police who are suffering that much and dealing with these issues, you delay in paying their allowances for food on one special day. It's all gone. And we can't manage it. We are playing with fire, and we need to start changing. The point is home, gentlemen, and we just need to bring order in the country. There is no further point to prove. We need a nation that we can hike on the constitution that we have.
Thank you. Let me thank you for those comments. Let me come to you, Kipruto, and I just asked the question that what we have on the street, first of all, is it a political problem? Is it an economic problem? Then it needs a political solution? Or how do they intersperse? Is this a mixture of both? Is it a constitutional problem? What exactly is on the streets?
Well, Edibal, in any conflict situation, it has two sides. The fundamental elements of conflict stem from conflict either over resources, and in this case we are talking about the resources of this country, or over beliefs. The one of resources, it is easy to resolve because you can talk about it, the cost of living, the government can explain themselves, those in the opposition can also pitch their issues, and there will be some people who will be listening and hopefully will be able to resolve. The second issue is belief. When it comes to conflict over belief, it is more difficult to resolve that, because if I take a position that I believe I won the elections and I start just thumping, and I believe I lost elections out of unfairness, that is impossible to resolve. And therefore, what we need is what Dr. Martin Olo was saying. Yes, we have engagement, we have dialogue, but is it structured so that a raft of all these issues are brought to the table and we are able to separate those that can be said to be low-hanging fruits and those that can be said they are medium and those that can be done in the long term. The major challenge that we've witnessed from the beginning of time is that one, what Professor was saying, we created a class society, the hustlers versus the dynasty. And that was very good for the campaign because we were able to mobilize people under the guise that we shall start with you, taking you up so that you take over from the dynasties. Forgetting the fact that a dynasty in Kenya has been wrongly defined. A dynasty in the real sense of the word are people who take over power in terms of inheritance. In Kenya, you go through election, and therefore a dynasty is a misnomer. When you start calling others dynasty, which therefore means, in the constituency that I represented for 20 years, I'm now termed to be a dynasty, and my son or daughter or grandson has no chance of running there because you will be labeled that your father or your grandfather was here, and therefore you do not merit this position regardless of the capacity that the person may have. The second problem is the issue of giving people labels before you demonstrate give us sufficient evidence that these labels arise out of a research that has been concluded, calling others tax evaders. And yet, we've not seen people who have been taken to court that yes, your taxes between this period and this period were not paid, and therefore you are given a chance to pay and you are penalized for that. That was a way of creating a narrative that now it is easy, you call tax evaders, and when we demonstrate about other issues, you say this is paid by tax evaders and so as not to pay taxes. That also was a challenge of communication. Number three, some of the events that have taken place, I talked about 7 years, but I can say 7 years are starting now. The moment you take away power from members of parliament on oversighting certain issues that are constitutionally provided by just bringing a normal legislation in parliament, calling it a privatization bill, you have already begun on your journey to dictatorship. The second issue, if you decide that yes, we are going to do this regardless of the law or at variance with the law, like IG Kome saying that he has banned all demonstrations, was against the law. And if on Thursday Azimio did not go for demonstration, that would be a beginning of dictatorship. The third issue is we have already created latent potential for animosity, hostility, toxicity, which component is you just need to light. You know, the post-election violence in Rift Valley, particularly, arose out of a build-up that was done by FM stations in the run-up to the elections. It was done by the narrative of individuals going to the station, talking in vernacular, and I can blame the regime that I was part of. They never took action against those individuals in good time. So society was already hell-bent on creating hate about certain communities. Some of us were labeled because of where we married from. That so-and-so who is married from this community has joined the traitors, is the worst betrayer of the community because he's worse than the enemy himself because he has joined the enemy. Now, that latent potential just needed the spark. And that is how we almost lost in 2007, 2008, post-election violence. Now, what we are building today is we are creating that latent potential of hostility, toxicity, and animosity. And when you talk of this Kenyatta farm, you are talking about all our farms. Because what I consider to be a large farm is something bigger than mine. But somebody who has 1 acre considers me to have a lot of land. And when you start that, you are bankrolling a process that you can never stop. So this is where I feel we must, yes, my good brother Dr. Green said Raila should stop. What is it that, you know, is you knock the door, then somebody tells you stop. What is there any movement from the other side to come and open the door? So we want to know, yes, we don't want to get violent. But remember the ball yesterday, I was watching very closely. At Imara Daima, the crowd was huge, friendly. They were carrying leaves. And those demonstrators were mainly, the ones at the front line, were ladies. And there was nothing better than that. If the police moved away and allowed Azimio team to move around town, it would have ended in the evening and possibly it would have lost its team. So they are the ones who are funding demonstration by funding violence. Yesterday, I had also the privilege of sitting in a restaurant almost opposite the gate that Raila joins in Ngong Road. And as we seated there, as I got in, I saw 2 lorries of policemen with all these funny things stationed there ostensibly to block Raila from getting out of his home. But then, by the time, I think it was about midday, even the policemen there were amused to realize Raila was already in Imara Daima. Because, and I could hear them talking that, oh, kumbe huyu mzee ameenda. because they were stationed there to block him from getting out of the homestead. But I don't know where he slept. I don't know how he got out of the homestead, possibly in a lorry. So, you know, some of these things are really bothering. And history is very unkind, I said earlier. People don't change. We know some of these people. I've known them for the last 30-something years or so, and they are violent at heart. Mm-hmm. So this issue, I will not advocate for Raila to stop. Mm-hmm. I think more of us should join Raila in terms of demonstrating until the government is able to sit down. When you win an election, you become the father of the constituency if you are an MP. When you win at the county, you become the father. Whether you are 30 years old or 50 years old, you become the father of that particular place. William Ruto is the president, is the father of the nation, the way Professor said. He must do what fathers do. When you see children are complaining, listen to them. Even if you may not have solution, possibly in their complaints, therein a solution lies. You will be able to answer them by listening to them. And you know, that is one of the hallmarks of leadership. Out of 50 things that a leader should do, one is the capacity to listen, and listen with intention to assimilate the information that has been given. This is not a listening administration.
Thank you. It's not a listening administration. They say also a wise man changes his mind. Let me just hear from you as well. Today I'm just receiving wisdom.
There's so much.
This is a council here.
There's
There's too much that is really coming here.
Except Prof, who is busy with witchcraft. So you must get out of this.
A wise man should be able to change his mind. And what we're actually asking is leadership from both the sides to get it. You know, when you break down the demand for us, there are those demand which you can call unrealistic if you want to use that term. But there are those demands which require attention because they are too obvious. For example, the demand that the Kenya Kwanza government resign, that is futile. They will not resign. But we can discuss. The demand that the IBC Commission has been reinstated is unrealistic. Okay? The demand to open the servers and revisit the issue of the August 22 election, you can describe that as stale. The demand on a reconstitution of the selection fund of IBC commissioners is legitimate. And that is a point for discussion. The demand that the Kenya Kwanza government lowers the cost of living has strong and legitimate basis because we can see it. The demand that Kenya Kwanza ceases to undermine and scatter the opposition is legit. Because the first thing the president did, for whatever reason, even before he was sworn in, was to buy the MPs from northern Kenya. So that is a legit requirement. The demand that the Kenya Kwanza administration upholds transformative constitutionalism is legitimate and just. Because right now, they are operating with the complete disregard of Article 10 and Article 232. What is the importance of those two articles? It's about inclusivity. It's about making all Kenyans feel that they belong. Okay? Now, when we say that this is a limited liability company, we have removed shareholding. We have violated that. So this is a legitimate demand by the opposition. Removal of essential subsidies and critical safeguards for social protection. We can discuss that. It may not be done, but it's a legitimate point for discussion. Irresponsible government expenditure in the backdrop of dire and deteriorating living conditions is a point that can legitimately be discussed. Lack of meritocracy and the sovereignty in the populist and reckless partisan state appointment involving friends and the cronies is an obvious point because we can see it, but that's again is a point for sovereignty and discussion. Deteriorating independence of the criminal justice system is something that can be discussed. Bloated and growing government wage bill in the backdrop of shrinking GDP, that is something that both the opposition and the government can sit down and see how to assist the country. Punitive, condescending, and utterly inconsiderate taxation regime in the backdrop of growing poverty. The digital thing you talked about, you see, because the jobs are not available. When you graduate these students, they have one computer and they start doing something, even writing some papers for some people in China and America. You testing that one, okay? You are not helping the country, you are not helping set up businesses. So that is legit for discussion. Insensitive display of ethnic arrogance and masculine bravado. We can do without that. We want humble leaders. We want leaders, we want to respect them because they are humble and they appreciate their power. So in short, let me just finish quickly here. Profiling and targeting indecent, including media and opposition, like we have seen there in the newspaper, that is not right. But that can also be discussed. Collapse of the Kenya shilling is something that the opposition and the government can talk about. Grandstanding, growing sycophancy, and the underlying position.
I know the list is frustratingly long.
So let me stop there.
Is that a thesis or
let me I'm saying, you see, in the negotiations, what you do is to categorize the problem so that you are able to separate the problem from people. Because the problem affects both of you. So that you can address the problem regardless of who says there is one, as long as you recognize there is one. So this is what we are not doing, and we need to do that so that we can find a solution. In fact, in my opinion, when I look at the opposition demands, they want to make our government better. Now, why are we here? Why is the street becoming the parliament? Because in all honesty, we don't have a parliament. And this is another point that I opposed the BBI. I was in the Linda Katiba. But there was one provision of the BBI which I think we need to revisit, that when we run an election, the run-up takes over the leadership of the Senate. Now, you are able to prosecute your case through parliament. But what is happening now, we have emasculated the parliament. Parliament should be taking up these issues. Parliament should be taking up the cost of living. This is how civilized society do their thing. But now instead of parliament taking, because parliament is in the pocket of the executive, the street becomes the new parliament. So we need to retrace ourselves. We need to humble. They say you humble yourself before God.
As he ends up, one of the things we need also to
let's just pick up, pick up with you so that we can also be getting our closing remarks briefly.
When he was the Commissioner for Cohesion, how much cohesion did he create? Because a lot of these good things are also happening because of lack of our own contribution. When you see the people who have been part of the so-called solution becoming part of the problem, you keep asking, what is it that spoils people when they get into public spaces? Because I've just been saying that when you look at the characters today in the Kenyan discourse, Uongozi discourse, they are the same ones, and now they are on a different side. Musalia Mudavadi was a part of the dialogue, is with Ruto, who he was with at that time, and Ruto was the hardliner, and at that time Musalia was the compromising guy. Now, I hope he's going to play that role in this other side. When you look at Martha Karua, she was a hardline on this end, and now she's now a hardline on this end. Raila was part of that dialogue, indeed. That's why we got our results. Now, what did we learn from that? We don't seem to learn. We have a new constitution. It seems to be dealing with this. Professor is saying that we should amend it. There's nothing wrong with our constitution.
I didn't say we amended the constitution.
Even this thing about BBI, the problem is us.
Yes.
You see, they say you give bad people a good constitution, they'll do nothing with it. But you give a good constitution, you give good people, even with a bad constitution, they'll still be okay. So the point is, it's not the constitution, it's us. We are looking for solutions from I don't know where. Our constitution, we try to borrow from South Africa, from the US, from UK. Now we are confused. Now we don't know what we want.
I think I'll give you a short answer though.
But, because of time.
Yes.
Just allow me.
I'll give you a very short answer.
In your closing remarks. Thank you. Are you done?
I'm done.
Okay, let's say because we bring it to a close, and you can see even for the conversation to go on moving forward, you'll find it's the same cow, but you're wondering how do you slice it again? Because all these issues we're discussing, we'll be regurgitating them. We're regurgitating, and next week it will be the same, calling for dialogue, calling for a stop of a protest, calling for a review of a constitution. You'll understand we're actually stuck in a morass. Should we continue with the conversation, or what should happen? Because it sounds like we are a broken record.
The Japanese have a way of doing things that is very different from a lot of people. In fact, when you understand the Japanese and compare with other parts of the world, then you can easily say that there are only two types of people in the world, the Japanese and everybody else, out of their commitment of what they do, not to exclude them or pick them out on the reality, on a few things. And one of the principles is called the three realities principle, which has made institutions like Honda grow very big. They call it Gempa, which is identifying the market. They also call it, then there is Gempa, there is Gembutsu, which means identify the product, and there is finally the third one, which is called Genditsu, which is going down to the market. Now, while all this is happening, and it is simplified in what in Kenya we say vitu kwa ground ni tofauti, I want to call upon leaders to get to the ground so that they realize what is happening. They realize that we are now, we are in the rainy season, and we are becoming careless because there is a lot of water that is now coming, and we are going to let it go when we are losing an opportunity that could save lives, that could improve the cost of living by harnessing as much water as we can right now. We need to get to the ground so that we don't become again what the Japanese call natto, N-A-T-O. It's a type of food, but they have changed it to say no action, talk only, which is something that we must avoid. Can we get to the reality? Cost of living is high. Can the leaders get down and deal with this? And when I say that Raila stops the demonstrations, I'm not saying stop the demonstration. I'm saying consider stopping the demonstrations, because the point is home. Are we going to get the point drilled into our blood by losing more lives? By businesses suffering the way they are suffering? By stressing up Kenyans the way they are? In this week alone, the Oni of Ife, a leader, the senior leader from Nigeria, has been here with an investment of more than maybe 40 billion US dollars, wanting to invest. He's seeing all these things in front of his eyes. During this period, our good president was in Europe talking about things of investment. While he's talking about that, the country is burning, and that is what people are seeing. Look at what has been taken out there in Al Jazeera, in BBC, in CNN, what is happening. That is not what we want to. And that is why I say the point is home. Gentlemen, let us sit and talk. Preachers and people in the church pray, people in the mosque. As we talk about this, the Muslim community just yesterday was donating 89,000 US dollars to UNHCR for drilling water in Dadaab. These are the kind of things that we should be engaging, and these are the kind of things that, against anything that is negative, Kenyans want to see happening. And that is, we just have to drill hope to our people, and I think that is what we need. We can't afford to lose our country.
Thank you.
As we see it.
Right, thank you. Just briefly on statement as we're winding up, because still, even as we're going on with these demonstrations, leaders, some of them, they're not really fully awake to what is happening, that is being instigated with some of inflammatory statements that they're making so far. Like, the majority leader saying that, arrest Raila, nothing will happen, to the country. Or, you need to resign. you as a political leader, this is your time to resign. That's what you're calling for, right? Just briefly, as we are winding up, let me just begin with you. How then do we tone down on some of those very visual, inflammatory statements that
I think fundamentally we need to...
Just very briefly.
We need to improve our communication. Basic. We need to improve our communication, and we need to know which side are we. Are we in the current administration? If the answer is yes, can you learn not to say something that can be interpreted differently by your supporters? Are you in the opposition? If the answer is yes, what can you do to make sure that as you press for your issues, you do it within the confines of the law, but insist, anybody at variance with the law, you must insist that you press on, but use a language that is uniting and bringing people together.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor.
Yes, Professor Law. The Kapara Commission, because you can call it that, I think that's the only commission that really solved a lot of problems for this country. The Tana River, if you remember, was a perpetual problem. We were able to solve that problem with the finality, and I can give you the details when we are off air. What I would like to say is this. The government and the opposition will talk. They will have to. They have no choice. My request is please do it now when we have incurred less cost. Don't do it after the cost have mounted. Kindly do it now.
Thank you.
Very smart. That's very smart for Professor today. I want to agree with the Professor.
He's always smart.
Yes, yeah, I mean, I want to agree.
This is professorial talk.
That, we have no choice. We have no choice. We are all Kenyans. We live in this country. This is our motherland. We don't have any other country to go to. We do not want to talk about anything else like secession or whatnot, because this is Kenya. This is one indivisible Kenya. We must all feel that we belong. We must all be ready for the truth. A friend of mine tells me to remind you that even opening the servers is important for purposes of bringing closure. If you have nothing to hide, open it.
Be transparent.
Yes, yeah, be transparent. Just, people should walk over it. Actually, I don't even think, I don't believe that if you open it, you'll see a lot. I don't know. Because this technology is something that people can play around with. But the point is, let us be honest with ourselves. Let's be truthful. And let's try and live the truth. Because our problem is that we live a lie. And living a lie cannot take us far. And that's why I have a problem, and you're right. We keep on talking about the same things, and we complain when you're on this side, we do the opposite when you're on this side, and that is not what Kenya needs. We need a fairly honest and a fairly candid country.
Right. Dr. Finally.
Kenya is a great nation. We belong here. Let us take individual responsibility. We have made mistakes before. Let us learn from them. We make mistakes every day. Let us make sure that we don't repeat the same mistakes. Let us all, including leaders, be problem solvers, because we should not be sitting waiting for others to solve our problems. And finally, let us respect each other. You are because God placed you where you are. That does not mean that others are lesser people of a lesser God. They are all belonging to God, and you must respect others, and that will bring cohesion in a nation that needs that at such a time like this.
Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you for your wise counsel. And I think also that you've done very well in trying to streamline that message, and we hope the leadership is listening to you guys, where we know even William Grader said that, democracy, it begins in conversation. Right? So it doesn't just begin on that high table as well. Democracy begins here as well. And so I want to thank you so much for your input and what you normally do. A very good salutary
Before
effort.
you
As
finish,
intellectual
before you finish, I must thank you on behalf of the media houses. And we are here celebrating you. Keep doing what is good for common good. And particularly today for allowing us to pray on set. May God bless you.
Indeed. It is not me alone, but of course also my entire team, the camera crew, the directors as well, the producers, and of course the editorial team as well. Thank you so much. We really appreciate also you waking up early in the morning, beating the rain as well, I think it's a big challenge. Most of them will tell you, I'm not a morning person, but Professor is here, even before me sometimes.
I've told you that Mheshimiwa here wakes up at 3 to look after cattle. So by 5 he's ready.
Especially with the raid of the farms now. Thank you, Judge Chivala. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. God bless you. You're the best.